No one ever agreed on what truly happened that night, but a single question still fractures anyone brave enough to ask it. How can an entire district vanish from every official record without leaving secret a single trace of smoke? The Forgotten Zone, once called Ashward District, burned in 1974. At least that's the version whispered in archives that shouldn't exist. Survivors speak of a fire with no flames, a heat with no source, and a silence so absolute it felt intentional, as if something below the streets had awakened and demanded everything be erased. And when investigators returned at sunrise, every map, file, and registry referencing Ashward had been wiped clean, replaced by blank spaces no one could explain. Some say the city hid the truth. Others believe something far older did. But all agree on one thing. The night Ashward vanished didn't end. Its echo just went underground, waiting. Hours ago, a sealed box emerged from a condemned storage wing belonging to the municipal archives, an area supposedly emptied decades ago. Inside it, a metal reel stamped with the date July 14, 1974, charred around the edges but perfectly intact at its core, as if the fire had burned around it but never touched what mattered most. The archivist who found it quit immediately after watching only 30 seconds, whispering that the footage showed streets that no longer exist and shadows that moved against the light. Now the reel is in your hands, cold despite the warm room, vibrating faintly as if something inside it wants out. And the moment you lift the lid, a static hum begins to rise low, hungry, growing fast, before the screen flashes alive on its own.
The footage stutters, jumps, then steadies into a grainy shot of an empty intersection, its street signs half melted, its asphalt cracked like dried skin. A dim orange glow pulses at the edges of the frame, but there is no fire, no smoke, only the suggestion of heat twisting the air as if the district is still remembering how it died. A low rumble fades in, not from the reel itself, but from somewhere deeper, as though the room is resonating with whatever the camera captured 50 years ago. Then a figure appears at the far end of the street, tall, rigid, motionless. At first glance, it's a man, but the longer you stare, the more wrong the silhouette becomes. Its elbows bend too far backward, its knees point inward, and its head tilts as if listening for your breathing. The camera zooms without being touched, focusing on the figure's face, but where features should be, there's only a glossy black surface reflecting the glow behind it. And just as the figure begins to lift one arm, joint cracking like burnt wood, the reel skips violently to a new scene. The camera now moves as if carried by someone running. Streetlights overhead flicker in a frantic sequence, creating the illusion of dozens of shadows sprinting alongside the operator. The lens catches glimpses of storefronts with shattered windows, walls carved with symbols that look melted rather than painted, and alleyways where shapes recoil from the light too quickly to be human. A distorted voice begins whispering beneath the audio, not part of the original recording, but bleeding into it from nowhere, forming half sentences about the sealed doors and the ones underneath. The real temperature rises against your fingertips, vibrating harder, the metal almost thrumming like a heartbeat. Then suddenly, the camera stops, locked onto a single door marked Block 7A, charred yet intact. A shadow slides across it, thin, stretching, reaching, before the entire screen erupts into blinding white, and the reel cuts off mid-sound, as if something just severed the recording from the inside.
The room falls silent after the reel snaps off, yet the air still vibrates as if the recording hasn't truly ended. You set the metal canister down,
but a faint tapping begins inside it, slow, deliberate, like someone knocking from the other side of a wall no longer standing. When you lean closer, a static pulse flickers through the nearest lamp, dimming the light until the shadows stretch unnaturally long across the floor. That's when you notice something impossible. The char line around the edge of the reel is no longer burnt black. It's spreading upward, fresh, widening as if the footage is burning again from the inside. And beneath the deepening scorch, etched into the metal, a sequence of numbers begins to appear, hand-carved, uneven, trembling. 7A, access, unseal. The code pulses faintly, radiating a heat that feels more like breath than temperature, as if the district itself is trying to guide you somewhere it was never meant to reveal. Before you can step away, the projector, still unplugged, clicks back to life with a metallic groan. A new image flickers onto the wall, a corridor you've never seen, narrow, windowless. Its concrete walls drip a dark, tar-like substance that crawls downward instead of falling. At the end of the hallway, a door, identical to Block 7A, stands slightly ajar, trembling as though something behind it is breathing hard. The camera behind the footage begins moving forward on its own, each step echoing as if the floor is hollow. Then the picture distorts sharply, warping into a swirl of shapes, until one detail breaks through the noise. A human hand reaching from behind the door, fingers charred, nails fused, pointing directly at you through the screen. And just before the frame collapses, the hand curls inward, beckoning. The projector light thickens, turning the room into a dim tunnel where the walls feel too close, as if the footage is warping your surroundings to match the corridor on screen. The camera continues its slow, involuntary march toward the half-open door, and each step is punctuated by a hollow thud that doesn't sound like footsteps anymore. It sounds like something beneath the floorboards striking upward in rhythm. A faint, rhythmic scraping rises from behind the door, not metallic, not human, more like bone dragged across stone in deliberate patterns. The concrete walls pulse subtly, almost breathing, exhaling a faint mist that fogs the lens for a second before clearing. When the camera is just a meter away, the door shifts, only a few millimeters, but enough to reveal a slice of total blackness inside, an absence so dense it seems to swallow the dim corridor light. A whisper emerges from that void, layered and broken, repeating a phrase you can't fully decipher, but that ends with your name, spoken in a tone that suggests memory rather than recognition. Suddenly, the footage fractures into sharp, jittering frames, each blink revealing a new, impossible detail. First, a row of charred footprints leading into the darkness behind the door. Next, claw marks along the ceiling, fresh and dripping with a tar-like residue that hisses as it falls. Then the hand reappears, this time closer, pressed flat against the inside of the door, fingers splayed so wide the joints seem torn open. The skin is blistered, yet the hand twitches with intentional movement, tracing the symbols carved into the wood, spirals, intersecting lines, and the repeated number 7 arranged like a warning or an invitation. The final frame freezes abruptly, locking onto a pair of eyes glowing within the darkness, amber, unblinking, fixed directly at you. And just as the reel begins to buckle from heat, those eyes widen in recognition before lunging forward, filling the entire screen in a single violent burst of motion.
The screen stays black for several seconds, but the darkness feels alive, stretching outward until it seems to press against your skin. Then a faint glow emerges, soft, trembling, like embers beneath ash, revealing what looks like an underground chamber carved from uneven stone. The camera's perspective wavers, as though the operator is struggling to stay upright. Along the walls, twisted metal beams protrude at unnatural angles, each one stamped with the same marking, 7A, repeated as if the district had been dismantled and rebuilt beneath the earth. The chamber air ripples with heat, but no flame is visible. Instead, a low hum vibrates through the entire room, resonant enough that it feels like it's echoing inside your ribs. Suddenly, silhouettes appear at the perimeter. Tall, wrong-shaped figures watching from alcoves carved too narrow for human bodies. They don't move, yet their shadows stretch toward the center of the chamber, sliding across the stone like spilled ink seeking a way out. The camera tilts downward, revealing a circular hatch in the floor, sealed with thick bolts and layered symbols matching those carved on the door above. Dust trembles on its surface, rising with each pulse of the chamber's rhythmic hum. The operator reaches toward it, and for a moment the lens reflects their hand, burnt, cracked, identical to the hand that beckoned earlier. As their fingers graze the hatch, a burst of static erupts, and the silhouettes at the edges begin to shift, slow, synchronized, stepping forward as if awakened by the touch. Their limbs bend unnaturally, joints rotating with deliberate clicks that echo through the chamber. The hatch emits a single metallic groan, a lock disengaging from somewhere deep below. And as the floor begins to split, revealing a shaft descending into total darkness, a voice whispers from the depths, soft, urgent, telling the operator not to open it. But the final bolt snaps free on its own. The hatch cracks open with a blast of stale air that rolls upward like a long-buried exhale, carrying the scent of charred soil and something older, mineral, metallic, almost electrical. The camera tilts into the shaft, revealing a spiral staircase carved directly into the rock, each step etched with the repeated symbol 7, some markings scorched as though burned from below. A faint red glow pulses far beneath, too steady to be fire, too alive to be mechanical, throbbing like the heartbeat of the earth itself. As the operator begins descending, the walls tremble with a distant thudding, timed and deliberate, echoing the rhythm heard earlier above ground. Shadows flicker along the staircase, stretching and contracting like living strands of smoke, some brushing the lens with a static hiss that distorts the frame. Halfway down, the camera pauses, capturing a series of handprints smeared across the stone, burned into the surface, fingers elongated as if melted mid-gesture, all pointing downward toward the source of the red glow pulsing with increasing urgency. The stairwell narrows until the camera scrapes against the walls, stone dust raining in thin streams that vanish before hitting the ground. The glow expands into a cavernous chamber where the floor is covered in ash, arranged in spiraling patterns, each loop converging into a circular pit at the center. From that pit rises a low vibration, almost a voice, forming fractured syllables that resemble warnings but spill into unintelligible static halfway through. At the edge of the pit stands a figure, its body charred, its limbs stiff, its head bowed as though listening. When the operator steps closer, the figure jerks violently, its neck snapping upward with a crack that echoes through the cavern. Its eyes shine with the same amber glow seen earlier, but now they pulse in sync with the chamber's heartbeat. It raises an arm, pointing toward the pit, and the ash spirals begin to shift, slowly, purposefully, like something beneath them is crawling upward. Then the floor buckles, and something starts to rise.
The ash spirals collapse inward as a massive pulse of air erupts from the pit, dimming the red glow for a moment before it flares back brighter, now throbbing with a rhythm too deliberate to be natural. The camera shakes violently, its frame warping, as if the heat alone is bending the lens. Slowly, something ascends, not a creature, not a machine, but a shape made of shifting shadows, its edges constantly rearranging, as though deciding what form to take. Its surface ripples like liquid soot, revealing hints of skeletal structures that vanish just as quickly. The operator staggers back, but the figure at the edge of the pit, the charred sentinel, drops to its knees, bowing to the rising entity. A deep resonance fills the cavern, vibrating through stone, flesh, and air alike, and fragments of language rumble through the chamber. 7. Return. Unseal. The entity stretches upward, towering above the operator, its core pulsing with molten red as it leans forward, testing the space between worlds like a creature sniffing the surface for the first time. The cavern walls begin to blister, stone curling outward as though recoiling from the presence below. The operator tries to retreat toward the staircase, but the shadows cast by the entity extend unnaturally, reaching across the ground like searching tendrils. One of them brushes the operator's leg, and the camera tilts sharply as a burst of static tears through the audio. The skin where the shadow touched blisters instantly, crackling like charred paper, and the operator's ragged breathing fills the soundtrack. Yet the entity stops moving, not retreating, not attacking, merely staring with pulsing ember-like cores where eyes should be. Then the chamber trembles violently, dust raining down as cracks split across the ceiling. A new sound rises from deep within the pit, a second presence awakening below the first, heavier, louder, impossibly vast. And the entity turns sharply, as if sensing something coming that even it fears. The cavern heaves as if something enormous is breathing beneath it, each exhalation bending the red light into trembling waves that smear across the camera lens. The first entity convulses, its shape unraveling into jagged ribbons of shadow before knitting itself back together with a shudder that sends shards of darkness scattering across the floor. The operator braces against the wall, but the stone itself feels soft, warm, almost pulsing, as though reacting to the presence rising from the pit. The molten veins along the cavern walls writhe like living serpents, brightening until the entire chamber flickers between red and deep blue in chaotic, disorienting bursts. The sentinel's cracked body splits further, exposing a glowing lattice of blue fire beneath its charred shell, each fracture releasing a hiss like pressure escaping from a sealed chamber. A sudden, sub-zero gust blows upward from the pit, extinguishing every ember except the twin lights, one red, one blue, warring in the abyss. The red entity stiffens violently, its edges distorting as though its very existence is being rewritten by the unseen force below. The whispers return, layered and impossible, threading through the cold air with a message that makes the operator gasp. The first has risen, the second wakes, the third must not see the sky. The pit then splits with a bone-deep crack that sends rock fragments shooting upward like shrapnel. The operator raises the camera instinctively and captures the moment the darkness below blinks. A colossal eye of blue fire snaps open, illuminating a vast, shifting mass beneath the first entity. The chamber quakes with a roar that isn't sound, but pressure, a force that crushes thought itself. The first entity staggers backward, trembling, shrinking away from the eye, as if whatever is waking beneath it is the true master of this place. And then, from the darkness, a second eye ignites beside the first. The twin blue eyes widen beneath the pit, flooding the cavern with a cold luminescence that drowns out the red glow entirely. The first entity collapses to one knee, its shadow-fused body trembling in spasms, as though the gaze below is dismantling it cell by cell. The operator stumbles back toward the stairway, but the stone steps twist, elongate, and split apart as if the cavern itself refuses to let anyone leave. The camera shakes violently as fissures race across the floor, forming a spiraling pattern that converges directly beneath the operator's feet, an ancient sigil burning to life with blue fire. The massive presence below shifts again, forcing the entire chamber to tilt in its direction, and a voice, deeper than mountains breaking, colder than buried graves, rises from the abyss. The second returns. The balance fractures. The witness must remain. The operator's breath becomes ragged, their voice shaking as they whisper a trembling plea for help, but the sentinel moves first. Its charred, splitting frame drags itself upright, now glowing entirely from within, blue fire pouring from its hollow eye sockets. It turns toward the operator, not attacking, not reaching, but pointing at the sigil beneath their feet. The red entity suddenly lunges forward, its tendrils thrashing in frantic arcs as if trying to shield the operator from whatever the sigil is awakening. But the cavern reacts violently, the molten veins turning black as they crack open and release a storm of ash that spirals into a vortex above the pit. The two eyes narrow, focusing on the operator with terrifying precision. Then, in a single earth-shaking moment, something enormous begins to rise. Something with a shape too vast, too ancient, too deliberate. The first part of its head breaches the pit, and the red entity screams.
The colossal shape rising from the pit forces the cavern to stretch, stone groaning like metal under impossible pressure as the blue-lit mass continues its ascent. Its head is not a head at all, but a crown of interlocking plates that shift like tectonic armor, each movement releasing shockwaves that rattle the operator's bones. The red entity is dragged backward by an unseen force, its tendrils clawing at the air as the blue titan asserts its dominance, flooding the chamber with a cold radiance that erases all warmth. The molten veins along the walls burst into cascading streams of blackened ash, spiraling upward as if sucked toward the titan's forming silhouette. The sentinel's body splits completely, collapsing into a heap of cracked shell as the blue fire within rises like escaping breath. The operator tries to scream, but sound refuses to form. Time around them seems to stutter, slowing, then snapping forward in violent lurches, each shift revealing more of the towering being climbing from the abyss. And then, with a tremor that splits the cavern floor open, the titan speaks, not with words, but with a psychic blast that forces the camera downward, imprinting a sigil of glowing lines across the operator's skin. The operator's hand seizes uncontrollably as the sigil burns brighter, reacting to the titan's presence with a pulsing intensity that threatens to tear flesh from bone. The chamber dims except for the entity's eyes, two suns of icy blue, watching the operator as if evaluating their worth. The red entity screams again, a distorted wail that cracks the stone and collapses part of the ceiling. But even as debris rains down, the titan's gaze does not shift. The vortex of ash above the pit tightens into a perfect spiral, the rotation accelerating until arcs of pale lightning crackle through the smoke. The titan lifts one massive arm from the abyss, revealing an impossibly long limb etched with symbols that match the burning pattern on the operator's skin. The spiral above contracts violently, the air compressing in a crushing silence. Then the titan raises its arm higher, and the sigil on the operator flares white-hot, followed by the sudden, catastrophic collapse of the entire cavern as the titan lunges upward, reaching directly toward the camera.